So thanks a lot, Joy sir, again for giving us time as we sit again in the second session of the first episode of Product and People and uncovering what design actually stands for. I think in the last session we tackled a lot on how a few of the aspects of design have been overlooked and what designers can actually look at. So I think super fun session last time, and as we
Mm.
continue, I think towards the end of the last session, sir, we were talking about let's say AI and the impact that this is having on the entire field, and then obviously not only on design, product design, but the entire spectrum of every white collar job and maybe blue collar as well in some way. As of today, a lot of people sort of in the industry believe that maybe with tools like let's say Stitch that Google has come up, or a lot of vibe coding tools that are now starting to support design, or maybe V0 by Vercel, right, which creates a first kind of a UI UX. What are your takes on how these tools can actually come in handy? And then, if someone is sort of a budding designer today, how should they sort of feel about this? What they should sort of start focusing on that can
Mm.
actually help them sort of build the right expertise as a in this profession?
Okay. Um, I know it's a question even I want answered.
Yeah, I think everyone is
Uh,
thinking about it.
yeah, I've seen a few very interesting, such incredible, you would say revolutions that happened in this so-called information age. The first itself was the internet, the interweb, the web, whatever you want to call it. So that was huge. Then us being able to actually transfer massive amounts of data, so whether we started with CDs and Blu-ray and all that, so that itself was incredible. So much digital products sort of flowed into our lives. And when the entire device sort of became, not only a navigator, but you could get your emails on, you can browse, you can do so much. Initially, it was all really, really small screens and you can really interact with it. And then I think 2007, the iPhone sort of came, and I think the attempts have been made by many other companies before, but iPhone sort of came together, and that completely changed the way things were. And in the last 20, 30 years, what I've seen is a lot of that integration into single devices. The platforms and the OSs, they used to live separately. And going from one to another used to be a very difficult problem. But things have sort of now gone more into an integration phase.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and yeah, and we have seen this wave of incredible automation, knowledge management, being able to access anything from anywhere. Very candidly speaking, and very naively, we sort of believe that this will bring more knowledge and information and get us more connected. But we've also seen we sort of got more disconnected. We got into this post-truth kind of a world. So every sort of revolution has this very positive and a negative kind of an aspect to it, and we live through it, and that's how systems evolve. I is yeah. Now it's not that this has just come about, but it's been there, and I think I'm sure the companies have been working on it for many many years, especially the ones which were first into the game. I think Google itself did a lot of work. They've done fantastic work. The papers, I think, on adversarial networks was the base on which ChatGPT did a whole lot of stuff. And I think there's a lot more coming. I mean, right now there seems to be a bit of a panic also, and there's a whole lot of expectation also. There's a lot of experimentation and uh, lots and lots of views and ideas about how this thing's going to pan out. So, in some manner or form, I think a lot of things are coming together. I think that's an important piece to think about. The processing powers, the bandwidths, this incredible network of clouds, and things like that. That's all coming together. Um, but I still see AI really, you might have read a lot of these articles that it does a lot of pattern matching, basically speaking on what human beings have sort of generated on their own. What seems very fancy, it feels like a very enhanced or steroid form of a search. It can do multi turns, you can have conversations with it. And honestly speaking, the conversations can be brilliant sometimes. But yes, after a few turns, I've seen they tend to get stuck and they tend to repeat. But on the other hand, I've also seen that they've done brilliantly well. Generative AI, especially natural language, these things are very, very exciting. And I'm sure there are many others. The machine learning itself is sort of becoming more commonplace within most of the consumer tech companies. So that's kind of the background. I don't know how huge and far reaching the impact of AI is going to be, especially with intelligence becoming more generic, general intelligence or super intelligence. People have been saying all sorts of things. They may all come true in some format or some form. But coming to design, I think this is where we should step back and look at what really is design. I think people like me and whole others who've spent some time in this field, in some way we've not done that service. We've really not gone ahead and done a bit about talking enough about design. So in my mind, I remember my first day at college. I was at IDC, IIT Bombay. I think it was the first lecture, and the professor said, "What is design?" Everybody had their ideas of what design is. Um, and then finally he puts out this design as problem solving. And it was wonderful to just ground us all. We were all this cat's whiskers thinking we've sort of made it, and so design is problem solving. It's a very, very honest, a simple, very humble way of looking at design. It is true at some point it is, and depending on how you define problem and how you define solving, it can be stretched to a very large definition. Today, I think it's an integrative discipline. We bring in, if you actually look at all the seminal papers in the last 50, 60 years, they're not necessarily designers who really wrote them. All the Fitz laws and all these guys who did this work, they were psychologists, they were sometimes philosopher, artists, mathematicians, uh, who did a lot of work. Then computational, scientists, so system dynamics, systems thinking, design thinking. A lot of it came from the industry, and all kinds of people have sort of come together to imagine this world that you're building. Design is essentially it's a very deliberate shaping of the world, deliberate shaping or a conscious shaping of the world to meet human needs, right? And those needs could be anything. It could be physical, emotional, even some say spiritual. And it comes through this fusion of intent, context. But one thing I see goes missing is consequence. What are the decisions that we're taking, why we're taking, and how is it going to play out in the long term? And for people for whom it seems very abstract, let me just put it down with maybe a small example. So everybody goes out for holidays. So there's this entire platform which is deeply optimized for business. So booking.com, the largest in the world. And there's another company, which is say Airbnb, which is optimized for experience. So these are such different worlds, and everybody loves listening to Brian Chesky and his ideas and thoughts. But then we hear it and then say, "Wow, wonderful," and go back to doing exactly what Booking.com does. Nothing wrong with what Booking.com does from their perspective, but my perspective is slightly different. For me, this shape of the world should have a longer term understanding. It should be human centric. I've heard Don Norman talk a lot about it. And human centric or centered, sorry, I shouldn't say centric. It's become centric. It should be centered or humanity centered. In my mind, a designer can be seen, and that's really at that highest level where he or she is a creator. These are all creation, I would say, professions, call it whatever. I mean, it's a smaller piece of art. I think it's a younger brother of art somewhere, but it's also engineering. It is all, but again, engineers, they're also creators, right? And, but I believe in the analogy of the watchmaker. So, you've seen these beautiful Swiss watches where you can see all the gears and everything happening. So when you look at that, you have to wonder, if this watch is here, there must have been a maker. Similarly, this beautiful world, in all its complexities and whatever little algorithms and very interesting things that happen, that we have sort of found a bit. We've looked deep inside atoms and electrons and subatomic particles, and we look far into the space. We have to believe that there is a larger something, whatever there is a larger creator, there's a larger thinker. And I would see our work is really that small part of that thinker, that creator. And I think that's a huge responsibility for designers. It's very, very important for all designers to constantly study the work of the masters. Without that, we will never be able to build design which is intentional, right? Contextual. It is always situated in some place, like we were saying, right? Design is not in top 10 cities or top 20 cities or even in these 4,000 towns and cities. So India, for example, lives across
Yeah.
thousands and thousands of, but we do live in some sort of a cocoon, and we believe, working for FANG companies or bigger firms sort of makes us the masters of design. But this is just questioning. This is just questioning the codes that we wrote. Did we just do Control C, Control V, or did we really write something? Did we really create something? So it's just questioning that. And there have been people, we don't know of them. They're all across, who've done brilliant work, and they're not sort of called designers. And it's our job to go find them. It's our job to go be inspired by them and find that design. So the reason, again, I'm talking so much about design is because product design, or this modern understanding of product design, has kind of superseded everything else that design was. So it's a much broader, it has many components of ethics. A designer becomes at its best the conscience of a company, right? So he
Awesome.
constantly
Yeah.
thinks about who am I building for. He would ask why before he asks how, right?
Yeah.
Uh, it doesn't matter if anybody agrees with you, listens to you, doesn't. But in your mind, you should always have that question. You should always be questioning that piece, no matter where you are, what you do. It's absolutely the right of every designer, product designer, to seek good employment, bring prosperity, but it takes a lot more effort to, maybe on the Saturdays when you actually go study the works of masters, see what good design is, understand the spirit of design, the ethics of design. Somewhere product design has flattened morality, our meaning has been replaced by metrics. We sort of, um, I think, adore these concepts of scale, speed. We do. I mean, I personally also quite enjoy the huge scale that I've been allowed to play with, do it very quickly. Those are all great. But too much of that, and you start missing the slow thinking, pulling away from jumping onto your Figma files and stuff like that. So that's the basic context before I really come to AI and what AI might do. And I think if you understand what design is, you will be able to use AI in a much, much better fashion. Use the bias of AI to reduce your biases, right?
Awesome.
Use the speed and quality of the system to actually give you a lot more space to sit down and sketch, to write, to
Yeah.
think, to meet. It gives you a lot more space to do so many other things that older tools used to really capture that part of your world, and that's the whole point. So yes, I think last time also we were talking about, the floor is low now,
Yeah.
ceiling is going to be very high, and this hollow, that middle, is going to be hollowed out. If you think that you can only be known by your tools and how nicely you do your white coding, I think that's where I think every designer should have a point of view. Every designer should search for meaning. Apart from that, I think the scope of AI itself is going to be revealed in a certain time. At this point, I would say whatever system that you use, whatever tool that you use, live with it for some time. Just not that, something more. So you have to keep looking for that meaning. And if you can't find it, if you find it very hard, then I would get designers to really be more of startup owners, build it yourself, be the Lord and Master, or whatever it is, and bring more design happiness into this world and more ethics and consciousness into the world. I think that's the, and also we talked about it last time also. Culture, context is very, very important. It's not technology. Many things can be solved by non-tech ways. I think we've
Yeah.
just become too. deep entrenched that you want to solve everything with technology. Constraint is a very, very big feature or a trait of a good design or a designer. What not to design is as important as what needs to be designed. And the number of time I've seen teams and business owners mess up this exact point. And that judgment, that discretion comes through some deep thought, being, like you did, you went. And over the years, I think this is what we've got: too many tools, too many things to look at, but very little judgment. There is a wisdom asymmetry. This is something different from information asymmetry, but I think we have a lot of wisdom asymmetry that we can try and overcome through these nicer tools which are coming our way.
Awesome. Awesome. But I can only say one word, wow, sir. I think the way you have sort of shared about design, right? And I think one thing that stuck with me over and over again is that that line your professor said, design is problem solving. I think a lot of designers as of today feel that maybe the problem is already solved and now they have to visualize how users will interact with that solution that has come up, right? But taking a step backward, I think AI can be the real enabler in terms of how people will interact with whatever solution that you are building, but with the let's say the context, the culture that you mentioned, right? What exactly can be that deep rooted solve that will sort of have a large repercussion, or let's say solve it for the future, right? How do you sort of build that? I think that is where design actually comes in, and that is very, very powerful. I think a lot of people, if they start looking at it in that way, I think that is where I think we'll also start building real solutions that can actually change things for the better. And I understand and I echo that sentiment as well, that sometimes in today's world, a lot of product designers, or maybe all of us who are building technology products, do not think about consequences. And once we start doing that, I think the nature of how we are sort of building products will also evolve and change. And I think the three
Hmm.
C's that you mentioned, right? I think how do we sort of integrate that in every person who is sort of solving products and building these things? I think that will have to be a systemic shift, I think, which will take time. But if we are able to do that, I think the kind of solutions that we build will become 10x more sort of better or efficient. But yeah, I think there were so many nuggets in that, but I think those two really, really stood out for me.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. See, we have to be little aware of this, that present models are built and they're grounded on a lot of data which is written again in a, say, English, and they do have that bias, at least the grounding bias. Whatever we have seen, learned, used to be a lot more circular. It used to be very conscious of the environment where uh, we were growing. And you will see, I mean, if you do study even the diseases, for example, and what kind of people have what kind of diseases, especially the folks who've migrated from from Africa to Europe, from India to Europe to US and all, and they have these very unique set of issues, for example, even diabetes, and they tend to get it faster. Or in South America, very lean people, never had any problems, would walk days together. Suddenly have this massive outbreak of these kinds of lifestyle diseases. This is just really being out of rhythm, out of alignment with who you are.
Yeah, yeah.
And the reason I'm talking about is a lot of design is also like that. It's really out of alignment with who we are. There is no voice that I see for. We're trying a bit, all of us here and there, but and it's not a complaint. It's more a provocation to actually go look for it, think for ourselves. So AI will be somewhat have that bias, and to completely, for example, when we say Google it, we don't realize how dangerous that term is.
Yeah.
We think it's a very interesting algorithm that whatever goes in. Algorithms typically are very, very mathematical, very perfect. So you know what goes in, what comes out. Google is not that, right? It is gamed quite a bit. It has lots and lots of biases. To believe that what Google is telling you is absolutely the
Right.
truth, that's the truth that needs to be questioned. And the same thing is with AI also, because again, it's grounded on what is already there. It's doing it very
Yeah.
quickly. It's these millions of nodes that it can work with, neural networks and all that. All brilliant. But I think I've said it many times that these little buttons, simple buttons on our interfaces, they take us away from the internal systems, how things are, where they came from, how they function. So we stop seeing it. Earlier, guys could literally, I know India used to have so many ambassadors and premier Padminis. I don't know if this generation even remembers. The drivers could, get off, and they were mechanics also. They could fix it, and they can go on and on and on forever. It was like fix that, and today you can't even fix a little ballpoint. So again, something that I think Don Norman talks a lot about, the complexity of each of these little pieces is so much that they come with built-in obsolescence. They have to be thrown away. But I think the question is, where are you throwing it away? Where does it go? And it just creates a bigger divide in the world of the haves and the haves not. And I think this is where design as a consequence needs to be understood very deeply, more from the point of view of AI. AI can be used any which way. You can use it to support what you are as a designer, what you wish to do as a designer, or you can be completely dead by it. At this point, I feel a lot more is happening on the other way around. We are showcasing which tools, what we did, how brilliant it was. Yes, it is brilliant. Yes, it's nice.
Yeah.
But to what end? I think that's the important part.
Oh, that's a brilliant take, sir. I think something that you just mentioned 5 minutes back, that designers are the, let's say, conscience of the company, right? And they should be the ones who are constantly questioning that why we need to do something, right? And what, and not the how. I think, I think something that I picked up, and I think this will be a learning for a lifetime. How do we use AI to sort of question the biases and unbiased what biases we have, right? If you mix both of these things together, I think AI will be where a lot of designers can understand what the biases they have, what the society has, and then design then becomes very, very important, because I think AI will help you ship faster, but what to ship and why to ship and why that is critical for your user and how it sort of evolves into the entire ecosystem, right? What you mentioned. I think that is something that someone will have to take a stance for, because I've always felt that designers, in a way, and obviously by nature of some people choose that as a profession and some people are naturally inclined to it, I think have this natural empathy for the users and let's say the people and the ecosystem. And if they can translate that empathy into, let's say, something that is really valuable for them, not from a short term but long term perspective, I think that will be really, really valuable on how I see that. How do we build that as a core engine? I think that is where a lot of work needs to happen. And
Yeah. uh,
I think on the other end, sir, something that has been catching my eye, right? While obviously, for example, now ChatGPT, I think that sort of Ghibli trend that we have, right? That you upload any image and then you sort of get that. And obviously now you can just prompt them and it will create a design interface as well. However, at the same time, OpenAI, right, recently acquired the Join IB's startup, right, IO, for $6.5 billion, as they are envisioning that first was obviously the internet, second was the smartphone, third will be wearables or technology that does not even has an interface, right? And it's maybe hanging somewhere out there. And so I think this is the new kind of world that is being envisioned. And the while obviously there was a lot of chatter around the acquisition price and then why is, let's say, Man or OpenAI doing that, I looked at it that even if, let's say, OpenAI is, or a lot of AI tools are changing, I think they still believe that the human centricity of the design and how a lot of problems will be solved in the future, the core nature of that needs to come from a designer, right? That is why they went ahead and sort of invested such a large amount in it. And I think strengthened my belief that design will always continue to be the core part, because that is how you take a step back and envision that what exactly, as you mentioned, right, what exactly a human or a humane centric design would look like, how problems can be solved in future in a sustainable lens, right? So, and I think obviously a lot of engineers could have done that, a lot of product managers could have done that. But I think someone who has envisioned, and obviously today I use a MacBook Pro, and then obviously someone who has designed all of these interfaces, which billions of people now are using. I think they've trusted them again to use design as a thought process to figure out how the third generation of technology interface would look like. So yeah, I was amazed by that, and I thought that while AI is evolving and everyone is saying that, I think AI, or let's say OpenAI themselves, have sort of banged upon a designer and his design team to envision that. So any thoughts on that, and how do you sort of read that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll tell you one very interesting, and I've done some of these presentations where we do talk about it. Uh, so the entire field of HCI,
Yeah.
human computer interface, they sort of came in through the war years, World War II especially, and so these Americans used to build. They had this flying fortress, massive bomber with 4 engines. You needed a crew of 10 people. So, but they all had one very interesting problem. I 360 of them sort of, they would come down. They've done all the hard work. They were gone ahead, bombed in Africa or Europe or whatever, and they
Mhm.
would do a lot of these daytime bombings because it was not fly by wire those days, and you have to be sure what you're bombing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it was a little risky, of course. I mean, out there in the day. So they've done all the hard work. They come back, the plane sort of lands. It's landed, and
Hmm.
suddenly the pilot would retract the landing gear,
Okay.
right?
Okay.
And that's a very, very interesting problem. I was reading even the final report by
Awesome.
these guys, Paul Fitz. So I think he wrote that report. Very, very interesting why that was happening. And this is where, when you
Understood.
say what was engineered for and what would a psychologist like these would, do. So there was Al
Mhm.
Chapman's and Paul Fitz who studied this problem. Every time something goes down, first thing is blame the pilot. And
Mhm.
these guys studied that issue for a while. And pilots had very low life expectancy. So it was very expensive. Each of
Sure.
these bombers was so expensive. And they hated losing planes like that, right? It had no reason to be, after landing, after everything is done, then suddenly the entire thing falls through. So these guys, Fitz and all, they figured what was really wrong. And this is where engineering can go. Brilliantly engineered craft, but
Mhm.
the flaps and the landing gear, they looked exactly the same and they were next to
Oh,
each other,
okay. Yeah.
right? So it was quite possible for the pilot who was thinking that, now I've landed, I can pull my flaps up. Instead of pulling the flaps up, he was pulling the landing gear up. That small insight, and that led to a whole new design language, who led to a whole new field of HCI. But that little language is called shape coding. So what they said is that flaps should feel like flaps. So they just added a flap there because they couldn't re-engineer the entire cockpit. They just added a flap there. For landing gears, they added a wheel. Just by feeling, even at night, you could just feel through your thing. So now that shape coding actually goes through even today's cockpits. These things have carried on. A lot of medical instruments, surgical instruments, even gaming consoles. So
Yeah.
they are all shaped differently, right? It's not just for aesthetics. It's for the because the person is looking up and they really can't. They have to go by the feel, right?
Awesome.
And there are multiple controllers. So that's shape coding.
Understood.
Human beings are naturally, they love to experience this world through senses. So more digital interfaces also tend to become very isolating. So you may have thousands of friends on LinkedIn and Facebook or wherever you want to, but the fact is, that's not real.
Yeah.
You still want to meet people. You still want to, I mean, if you had the same conversation sitting next to each other, it would be a very different quality of conversation
Yeah.
than these kinds of interfaces, right? So we crave for these touches, the haptics, so um, I think anything which is more tactile, more physical, sort of is very reassuring, and the shapes matter, the way we see things. So I think design will always, the more we take away from what seems very natural, the more we'll crave that and we'll come back to it.
Yeah.
When you take a photograph, it is already taking a picture that the human eyes don't really see. It doesn't see in so much sharpness all over. Now
Yeah.
here's an AI that regenerates that in another shape, another form. That's a whole level, new level of artificiality. So it's going to be very, very confusing to our senses. It could be to bring in. that constraint. This is where AI should end. I have worked with governments for a while and so
Awesome.
try to influence through design thinking. So designers can be everywhere. I would say they could be in governments, they could be
Mm,
helping in public policy, they could be at the blocks, at the village level, at anywhere. And you can influence. You can influence this post-truth world with a lot of your work. We've
yeah,
lost that art of poster making. I
yeah,
remember, posters used to be so big and so vital and so beautiful for the society. And now they're just gone. Really, it's not there as an art. Every designer worth his salt craves the typography of a printed book or a printed poster, right? Because no matter what these design systems are, that typography is always out of the whack. Somewhere that's where this cottage industry of AI generated and design would be there. And
yeah.
that's why I'm saying you have to rise beyond that and think at the core of what classical design is. Um, and yes, printed letter or illustration, the reflective surfaces are very different from these digital surfaces, which have their
This,
own light.
yeah, yeah.
So one is working on so-called God's light, other one is just lit up pixels. So,
Yeah.
anyways, those are some side conversations.
No, no. Thank you, sir, for that interesting take. I think I also feel that you mentioned two couple of interesting things, right? One is that humans crave for that sort of sensory, sort of touch and aspects to come in, right? I think the gaming devices, and I think I first learned about shape coding and then shape designing, and all of these sort of aspects, right? When you're building for interfaces that people have to regularly get in touch with, I think they crave that they mimic what they really have been doing from their childhood, right? I also feel that I think what you mentioned as an interesting take, today we believe that Google it, right? And we are able to trust whatever Google is showing to us. However, if the first 10 results might be completely inaccurate, right? I think I or you are not in a state to even question that. We will close our eyes and we will believe what Google is telling us, right? About anything out there. I think with AI also, I believe that some of the work that they might be doing is in a way that how do we integrate AI in the physical life of people, in a way maybe sort of helps us move away from reality, but every now and then we'll always keep getting people, right, who will keep questioning them. So how do you build let's say interfaces that can build that level of confidence that sort of generates that trust on everything, let's say ChatGPT 4 or maybe 10 is telling us in the future, and then also we trust and perform that and don't have that urge to continuously go back, because I am very sure that all of us, right, felt that we started to use Zoom during COVID break, but after immediately Zoom after COVID restrictions were up, we wanted to meet everyone in person. Revenge travel as a word came in. There was so many
Yeah.
offline meetups everywhere. Everyone was sort of willing to meet offline, right? And I think that happens when you are forced into something, but as soon as those constraints are removed, you want to go back to your natural way. And that human connection, I think, will always remain as a critical need of human beings. And how do you sort of tap into that when you are nudging them to maybe step into a new reality which AI is shaping for us, right?
Yeah, one thing you have to be careful about, and I think that's the one which I would really tell everyone to be always be noticing of. See, the it said in scriptures that the devil may quote the scriptures as long as it serves its purpose. So, problem is not if the answer is obviously wrong. Problem is when it seems absolutely right and it's
Yeah,
not. Usually there is a bit of a subtext. You'll see everything is all facts, facts, facts. And then right at the end, there's a little bit of a subtext that changes the entire meaning of what you've been
yeah,
reading. That is what you need to be very, very aware of. What seems like truth but isn't, or what takes you away from truth so much that you don't know what it is anymore. Those are
yeah,
the difficult pieces. Imitation is the the best form or the smartest form of flattery. So a whole lot of things would pose as real,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
So the Indian Vedic systems, they have this concept of Maya. Now the Maya, the expanse of Maya is just increasing
Getting
incredibly now. Yeah, yeah. So being aware of it, very, very important. that you're not so consumed by these tools, by these systems. Use them as your servant, but don't use them as anything more. So, in fact, I think there's this thing that Rene Descartes, who says, "I think, therefore I am." But again, if you go back and search, I think what it meant in Latin is "I doubt, therefore I
Absolutely.
am." So in Hindi,
Questioning
it's
it.
called jigyasa. Yeah. So questioning is so important. So why did I say that design is some sort of a subset of art? Because art unravels the questions that have been answered already. That's the problem. There are so many answered questions that we have, and we never go back and recheck whether those answers are correct. So it's very important for that. So design has to be in that space of provocation. It has to be provocateur. It has to be at a deeper really true empathy is walking in that shoes, being watching. What designers have specially is, like, the great saints and masters are also called seers, so they can see deep. So at least as designers, start becoming seers. Just
Hmm.
watch how things are, go deep into watching, and you can watch through your eyes, and you can watch through the eyes of your mind. So the deeper you can watch, I think that's where the entire trick is. So they'll automatically give you questions, they'll start giving you answers, and just watch everything unfolding. So go out, travel a lot, listen to music, watch theater, as in with physical actors in front of you, not just cinema.
Yeah.
Cinema is another level of artificiality. It's fully edited, very less candid and real. It's very nice, and you will see how people express themselves, the songs they sing, and a lot of that gets overwhelmed with too much. Now you see music and synthetic music, actually, and that just starts stripping away that soul, the core of what it was. I think those are the things that we need to be aware of. In fact, there's a lot more junk in this world than good stuff, and it's really important to get to the good stuff. Not
Yeah.
every book, everything that comes out is making a lot more sense. They don't. I buy a lot of books, but a whole lot of them I just read a few pages and I figure that doesn't make much sense. People are just projecting their own ideas, like I'm doing right now. but anybody who's listening, watching, should really filter that, run those questions that emerge, those emergent questions that will come to you, go deep into them
Yeah.
and watch and see where it gets you. I think that's the important piece. Yeah. So be very aware of things that pretend to be truth, right? So there's no problem when something's obviously wrong. The problem is when something seems right.
It's very true. I think very, very interesting take, sir, because it brings me to two things. One is obviously you said that design is the conscience of the company. In a way, it's also maybe the ethical responsibility of designers to ensure that the way we are shaping the user behavior, right, or human behavior through products that we are building or interfaces we are building, that also gives them this sort of acute sense of where reality is, what is happening, and how we are sort of nudging
Mm.
them to perform. And I also see that, for example, today a lot of quick
Mm.
commerce has come into play, right? Which, in a way, I think people are already getting habituated for getting things in under 10 minutes. So I think what you were sharing, right? Particularly, I really love theater and I go and watch because I feel that it gives that human connection again. And obviously it is appreciating art for people who are putting that content out. But when I talk about quick commerce, I think earlier when I was researching about, let's say, a social commerce app being built for tier 4 people, I think I had this interesting conversation with let's say one of the female members of a small let's say maybe a lower
Mm.
middle income household in outskirts of Jaipur. And she said that, hey, why are you building this group commerce app, right? Going out of the house for grocery shopping is my only excuse for meeting a lot of people, having those chat, understanding what is happening in the community, right? If you take that away from me, so that is when it struck me that we are thinking about sort of solving a problem, but it might be shaping a behavior that may create a lot of challenges on how communities today operate as well. That is how powerful, I think, on whatever we are building, that has in terms of shaping communities as well.
No, in fact, it's not. It's actually a very, very good example. Every time you build a system, it replaces something else, and you need to know where that went. So the guy who actually created copy paste, I think it's called Tesla, Larry Tesla, I think. So
That's right.
he was with Xerox and then finally with Apple, and he did this copy paste and many other things that he did. I keep saying this to Tesla because he created this entire, he made this entire very complex system of copying a piece. Instead of what we had to do is to rewrite this entire thing all over again. So this really digital construct of being able to copy everything and then pasting it somewhere is something that this guy did. But he did something more interesting. He
Mm-hmm.
talked about the law of conservation of complexity. So the complexity of a system just doesn't vanish. So it goes away from maybe the user end to the back end. So for example, what Blinkit might be doing is doing a very complex process. There's a lot of orchestration that goes, and from the time we just press a button, add a few things, and so building that, menu, building all those items, getting all those SKUs and all the variants, then adding how many numbers, how many are in stock, out of stock, and then you build that cart, and then you say press, I want this. That goes into the particular dark store nearby, and then how you invoke a particular delivery partner to come and pick it up and within certain time and then deliver, and usually they are within that 2 kilometer radius. An entire planning of this, how they are, where they are, and how quickly they deliver. Not every dark store has everything, so sometimes they need to be split. But so the entire complexity of this has actually gone to the back end now, and there's a lot of technology involved. There's an offline, online pieces involved, a lot of players involved. The way the picker goes around, and how do you help that picker? So I think one of the guys in Blinkit team, they did a very nice way of how to design your dark stores. So it becomes easier for the picker to pick and to go to a particular shelf, and how he does his binning, etc. So complexity always moves from one place to another. But with that, like you very rightly said, experiences also move. So my entire experience of actually buying vegetables and shopping and picking stuff which I want has now, that entire control has shifted to somebody else, right? Plus, this entire trip that I used to have to walk to the market and meet my neighbors and talk to them while buying, haggling with the walking back. And then while walking back, also, you would probably meet an auntie. You will say, "Oh, what are you cooking today?" etc., etc. So it's a whole community piece. But given the sign of the times where people live where they live, they don't know so many people around them. We live in a very verticalized structures. We
Yeah.
just get out of the room, get into a lift down. So we don't know people. Nobody cares. Nobody bothers what you're buying. So it's just not what Blinkit is doing. It's how the society has kind of evolved in certain spaces. And the same system cannot be applied into a place where maybe, like you said, where they enjoy doing this. And that's their only escape, to go out in the market, meet other people, come back. We sort of replace that culture, habits, methods, rituals with something else. So when this goes away, then where does the rest of the time go? And I think Ogilvy used to say, consumer is not stupid. She's your wife. I would say consumer is not stupid. They are your children, and
Yeah.
that's what you're leaving them with.
No, I think that's a brilliant take, right? That consumers are your children, and but I think we have a very, very I think how we will be shaping behaviors, right? That will go a long way in how, let's say, the entire society functions in few years. Today it's tier one, where people have a lot less time. Tomorrow it would be tier two, and then obviously the entire society at large, right? They may be, the entire social buying experience might go away, and it might be replicated by quick commerce led buying, where you are getting things quickly at your doorstep. However, I think then design has a very huge responsibility of whatever they were people were missing. How do we sort of ensure that they keep getting those social signals that shapes the human behavior at large, right? Because all of those
Yes.
community interactions in some way or the other was actually fueling who we are as a person, who we are as a society. I think what that is going down, I think we'll have to figure something like that. There's a new AI tool that has come where you have to haggle with them to buy something, just trying to replicate the previous experience. However,
Okay.
obviously, I think that was just a fun anecdote, but I think what is
Mm.
happening is that in larger settings we might have to look at, and that's the responsibility
Okay.
of design. And I believe that couple of things, right? That design is the conscience of the company, and then obviously designers can shape human behaviors. I think that makes it a very, very critical profession and a responsibility at the same time for whoever is taking that up. So on that lens, sir, I think one thing that we have been discussing is that given your decades of experience in design, right? How do you think it has evolved for, let's say, products or let's say businesses at different stages? What it was, let's say, a couple of decades back, and how is it now? Has anything changed really from 0 to 1, 1 to 10, and then maybe scaling right to millions? Or do you believe that larger core tenets have remained same and just how it is perceived or how it is executed has evolved? So yeah, I think that is where we love to get your guidance.
Yeah. So obviously, things have sort of changed. And like I said, nothing exists in isolation. The way technology itself has moved, the way we move into different kinds of surfaces, the way we've been sort of be connected through
Yeah.
this massive mobile networks. So things have changed. Earlier, I remember most of the software used to be, you would write an SRS, used to be sort of a waterfall kind of a model. There also used to be a lot of failure, and there used to be a lot of these CRs, what you call change requests, and things depending on how you tightly write your SRSs and sign off. So there used to be lots and lots of documentation broadly. And I think at some point they got replaced with BRDs, business requirement documents, and now finally they are PRDs, where the product sort of. So from the project managers now somehow have become product managers, old wine and new bottles. So what has fundamentally changed? I think used to be a little more linear as a model. Used to take long. I remember one of my folks from my company had gone to work with a Japanese firm, and he used to keep coming and meeting us every 6 months or so. And every time he would come back, I said, "What are you doing?" We're just doing requirements gathering. So, in fact, the last time he came, he said, "It's been 2 years. We've just been requirements gathering, and the execution plan is just for 6 months. The entire execution will happen in 6 months, and they will do it. It's 100% guarantee they'll do it in 6 months. But and they will question everything, every spelling, every punctuation mark in the document, and they want to be really in that control. Brilliant. But then that got replaced by these so-called agile systems, which was really fast to move, fast to scale, build something, do an MVP, take it out in the market, go test your market, come back. Also, again, I think it's led by how Silicon Valley has moved, and there's little fundings that started coming in, and everybody just wanted to know, okay, ideas are great, but just give me a POC. And POC is not just how the software works, but tell me if there are folks willing to pay you some money for it. So I think that speed has sort of changed. We've become more iterative in some ways. Sometimes we just end up making MVPs which fail to meet any target. The idea must have been very good, but the MVP was lacking in so much, the quality of execution or fleshing of that core idea properly. It never became a desirable product. Also, because of the interconnectedness, we believe if something has worked here, something else must. There's something very similar must also work here. Again, yeah, as a model, yes, if Amazon works, there can always be a Flipkart. But again, it needs to be made contextual to this world. So I don't know if you know, I mean, all these big food companies like McDonald's and KFCs of the world, they've Starbucks of the world, they've just come in, gone back, come in, gone back, because initially they just came with all the wares that was already there, and then
Yeah.
they realized that okay, after the initial excitement, it just died out because you have
Yeah.
to make it work for India, for south of India is different, west of India, central India, north India. They're very different, and their catalogs can also needs that subtle differentiation. Somebody likes their coffee light, sweeter. Somebody likes the stronger.
McDonald's is
And
dosa burger now in south of India.
so,
I think that is the
so
level of Indianization that's happening. Yeah.
right, right. I know KFC, when KFC came in and they had their old stuff, then they went back. The food also has certain religious aspect in India, and you have to honor that. It's otherwise you're not going to get in that market, and
Yeah,
you have to
yeah,
do it
yeah,
very, very carefully. We've sort of realized that we need to go iteratively into a market and try and get the feedback coming in, and the feedback also needs to be verified properly. Otherwise, all metrics are just proxies. They're just telling us something. And
hmm,
if our mind just defaults to this is what it says, then it's a problem. You have to actually
yeah,
go back and have some proper on the ground evidence, anecdotes coming to you saying that this is what it really means. And so I think from a very planned, sort of a linear kind of a model, we've sort of come to a slightly more emergent, fast moving, sort of agile kind of a model. Now, like in companies like Zomato, few PRDs are written. In fact, we are very demo first kind of a company. So we build everything as a demo very
that's true.
quickly, get the demo out, let everybody, and we want our PMs, our designers, and everybody else to, I mean, it's been Figma till now to be able to work with such design tools. So all of them do. A lot of them are
Mhm.
actually, some of my colleagues in product have been absolutely brilliant. In fact, they know better Figma than some of the designers. Even I think our reports, annual reports, and
Yeah,
these also sort of get made in Figma itself. Books
yeah, I
are
see.
printed
Yeah,
in yeah. So that's how everything sort of came together. So we are very demo first, visual first kind of a company. So
yeah,
they cut down this initial part of that excessive documentation. But again, yes, it does lead to some problems later on, obviously. Somewhere you have to find that middle ground
sure.
where there's just enough understanding and clarity. And I think this is where, again, the designers come in. They are the ones who should stand for clarity and critique. It's their job to stand for clarity and critique going forward. And even now, no matter which company that you work for, don't just accept PRD and everything and say, okay, just do it. I know these questions are seen as a cost.
Yeah,
These questions are seen as delays. You could be speeding uh, very fast in the wrong direction, and by the time you get to end of it, you're really far away. So you have to ensure that your direction and your speed both are right, and the direction only comes through questioning,
yeah.
right? And from every level, everyone. And yes, I think that's a big shift that has happened. I think speed and scale from little more slow, thoughtful, and sometimes very costly processes, documentation heavy processes.
No, I think that is very, very helpful, sir. And I think what you just mentioned, right? I think one thing that I realized, obviously by failing a lot, is that even if the direction is right, right, and maybe if even if you're slightly slow, I think you'll end up with 80% of the wins out there. But if the direction goes wrong, and maybe you're very, very quick, I think there are very high chances of reaching a point of no return where I think a lot of startups die. I think QB is one example. I'm not sure if you have heard about them. I think they felt that the reels or short form video content behavior of people was increasing during COVID, and hence they created this, let's say, large episodes, maybe a Netflix that is segregated in 2 minute shorter reels, right? And they built a content worth $1 billion. The design team obviously sat, but then once they went to the public, I think nobody actually watched any content after the second reel. So their thought process of people will consume 40, 60, hundreds of reels in the same storyline. I think
Mm,
that where that was wrong. They went and built the entire product and spent billions of dollars, but eventually they had to sort of point up very, very quickly. And I think, for example, what the Japanese culture and what you also mentioned, right, has taught us
mm,
that attention to the nth detail, and maybe sort of when you mentioned, right, 2 years just gathering the requirement and then very quick execution when you have understood everything. I think when these are larger projects from point of no return, I think spending that amount of time also makes sense. But I think the depth of work that these people do, I think I've also worked with a lot of Japanese clients, and I really, really appreciate the detailing that they expect, and also they are willing to put in the efforts on. But once
yes,
everything
yes.
is clear, I think then you are super fast in executing.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so that whole tenet of sharpen your axe, 90% of the time and spend whatever 10% to cut the tree. I think they take it to that extreme level. Um, I do have a feeling that they're also questioning that now because with the speed at which the technology has moved, if you're going to spend 2 years just thinking about it, so they'll also need to have the same level of detail in probably shorter time frames,
Yeah.
and it needs to match the speed of technology itself. Without that saying, I think there's a lot of focus and attention to detail, and I think India, we just go the reverse, little attention to detail. That's not nice. I think we need to find a little more middle kind of a ground and take it from there.
That is very, very, and that brings me to sir that I think there's a lot of talk in the US in Silicon Valley about new kind of roles that is coming up, right? That is product engineer or design engineer,
Right.
designers who can also code, and let's say the product managers and the engineers, because a lot of things get lost in translation. And I think you were earlier referring to example of Brian from Airbnb. I think he has been very, very vocal about that, give more power to designers. So just wanted to, before we wrap up, just wanted to understand what
Mm.
is your take as how is design as a profession evolving, and where do you see, let's say, these synergies getting created, and what in the future will be, let's say, one of the possible ways in which it can go around
So yeah, I mean, and Brian Chesky has been saying the designers need to be given that
more.
role. I mean, see, a designer doesn't do everything, but
Hmm.
whatever the designer is supposed to do is very critical. I think that's more important. Every project that I worked on, I mean, I can't say I built this. There's so many more people who were with me. There's this engineering, the product, there's a business. We all built it, but I had a lot of inputs and support, and sometimes had to change my thought process because what the engineer said, or what the product guy said, or the business said, because this is on the ground. This is how it is. So we shouldn't call ourselves, I mean, from that domain, not creators. We are helping the process of creation. And that said, it's important, it's critical. So the space needs to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Given that you are a worthy designer, you understand that level of
Yeah.
design. Not every designer really helps himself or herself to learning everything. But more
Yeah.
important from the point of view of whether we'll replace engineers completely. See, the thing is, an engineer has studied for years, 3, 4 years, typically a computer science guy. He would have studied architecture, algorithms, and he understands these systems, what I'm saying, inside out. When something breaks, something goes off, he's the one who's going to fix it. He should be the one who's going to fix it. Of course, you could be a designer who knows, who's done computer science, but then again, a lot of this comes to practice.
Understood.
If the engineer who really understands the system well, who understands, who can write good codes, then he's the one who should be doing it. What designer can do is build a great prototype, understand how the system should function, bring more empathy, question, what the impact itself, the consequences, right? Build prototypes which are usable. So the big problem maybe again with Figma prototypes, sometimes they're not really usable for my UI dev. So they have to rewrite the code all over again. So those things will become better and better. I think whatever prototypes we build should be, at least from the front end layer, should be integratable to a back end layer very quickly. But again, you can't replace, at least I can't think of it right now. AI might replace that work and engineers work on its own, right? So it may be able to do refactor quickly, it may be able to generate some codes quickly. But again, you need a human mind to understand, because what AI is again doing is based on existing models.
Yeah.
And
It's not great.
the whole evolution of engineering, of computer science, is not just based on existing models. So existing models, they work as ladders. So you always go next, next, next. Somebody rethinks the entire system, build something new on top of it. And maybe at a generative sort of a way, AI might also be able to do that. And it should, in fact. And that's where, again, I think the judgment will again be sitting with somebody who's watching that entire system come to be. It's, whether this would work. So generative AI might give you 4 different ways of doing things, but who takes the call? Which one is the best? Possibly, and that's how far I can think of it right now. Things may be very different in a year or two, but I think an engineer's input from his learning, his education, his training is vital. Just the way, yes, a designer should be generalist. He should sort of understand these systems. He's working for these systems. Whether he's going to be a complete master of all computer science or not, I think not, at least not at this point. And if you're not the master of it, and if you have only a surface level understanding of it, then again, like I said in the beginning, you are at a very superficial mental model. The deeper mental models are somewhere else. When things go wrong, in fact, I've seen a lot of these vibe coded products.
Yeah.
They're not at the level which they're not secure, and they cannot be scaled to millions of users right away. And it needs an engineer to come back and fix a few things. So yes, you will need with this people with that judgment, that understanding of things inside out. We have too many roles for designers, and fortunately, every role kind of does the same thing, and that's a sad part. I mean, I've been reading sometimes these we want what they say hands-on designer, director or VP or something. And really, most of these roles tend to be doing very similar things. And if you really want the hands-on guy, get a super IC and things like that. But um, a a director in a team like this has very different kinds of responsibilities. Lead has a very different kinds of responsibilities. The split of their focus keeps changing. So the roles have to match the responsibility that guy is willing to take on. And those responsibilities, like I said before, is a lot more than just building a feature or a product. So
That's true.
as you grow through the system, as you understand your domain, you will have a lot many more questions, and you should be plugged into all those discussions. And finally, coming to, I've heard this gripe from many designers that, whether we get the seat at the table. I would say, you may or may not, you're not seen as business focused. So build your own table. So we need
Awesome.
more build your more tables. But then what designers should use that chair for themselves, it's the seat that they're looking at, is to propagate these wider ideas of what design should be. As
Yeah.
designers, we are also sitting at that chair, which should be used well, and we should understand the meaning of the chair, I think. So all of us sit on different chairs, engineers, designers, and they should serve that purpose. An engineer should engineer well,
Yep.
and a designer should design well.
Awesome. No, I think that draws to a lot of thoughts that we have also been getting from people. That I think the core professions, while they how they are perceived and what their day to day might look like, might keep changing and evolving. But having that mastery on the basic skill set and how to sort of solve problems, for example, from a design point of view, I think will always continue to be a real moat and something that will be difficult to find. But I think that's a very brilliant take, sir. That brings me to the last section of our discussion, where I wanted to throw some very quick rapid fires at you and maybe get your couple of lines output, right? So maybe we'll start with, I think we have sort of talked about a lot of design leaders who have inspired you, who have taught you. So maybe if you could summarize three people that our audience should go and check out, and maybe any three books that you recommend from them, or otherwise that they should read. Yeah.
Right. So, that's always a very hard question, but I'll at least just go from my personal experience, people who I think not so known, but they're important. So, starting from my own professor and guide professor, Kirti Trivedi, people should go and read his work on temple architecture. So, the entire concept of Mandelbrot's fractalization. And there should be videos online, and there should be his book, his paper should be there. It's a brilliant piece of work to get you started on understanding that India is not design poor. It feels poor because the way our public spaces have sort of grown to a lot of poverty and lack of resources, but we've had a very long tradition of design and design thinking. I think it's really important to understand those concepts, understand the role of a shilpi, and there again, what I was talking about, three, four different roles, and they all perform very specific pieces of work in, say, building a temple or building a housing complex. So Professor Trivedi, I think people should 100% check out. Professor's mentor, and I think IDC's mentor when we were there, was Professor Kohe Sugiara.
Awesome.
Professor Kohe Sugiara, they understand India better than Indians, and as Japanese, their attention to not only details of few things here and there, but detail to life and purpose of life, the meaning of life is very, very deep. And I think those are the people you should always look at. I mean, because I like systems, thinking in systems. So Donella Meadows, Thinking in Systems, it's a very, very interesting and important book to read. It may not be exciting per se, but once you understand how she thought through design, I mean, it's not even design, actually, it's systems. But for
Mm-hmm.
designers and for everybody who builds any kind of a system, any kind of a platform, that's a really core. So these are the people who are brilliant in giving that understanding. For young designers, I would say books are a lot, but look at the works of the best of the guys, stop going to dribble. Find out who are these really, really good architects, musicians, filmmakers, and look at their work. Yeah, I'm sure there are a whole lot of others. I might be able to send it out as a link or something, but yeah, these are, I many times I go back and look at their work. uh,
I think, and first of all, thank you, sir, for sharing about your mentors and their work, right? I think we will also work with you to find their links and add it for all the viewers and sort of
right.
community members. I think that would be very, at least I will go through everything. I really like sort of looking at what great work has happened. This is sometimes what happens, right? And where this question is coming from, that we as product managers, designers, or let's say builders are worried about whether this feature would work or not, but then sometimes the users really love. So any story from your entire career where a feature that you doubted but it turned out that users really loved it?
Yeah. Many times, I think it was during my clear trip days, there was this very interesting project. The PM just before us, the product head of product, he had envisaged that this entire flight booking experience, for example, is riddled with lots of these extras, and they are just frictions in me accomplishing a simple task of like finding the right flight and booking it. Um, he talked about this, and they came up with this little metric that I should be able to book my flight at, say, I think 5 times faster speed if I just took away all my friction points, like, asking people for booking their seats and insurance and baggage. I said, just take that away and let just people just book flight. That's what they're here for. Yes, my attach rates for these extra things would reduce, but my total conversions would be
Hi.
great.
Yeah. Yeah.
It sounded like a very reasonably good kind of a hypothesis. Then he was not there, and I think the team went ahead and did a little A/B test, because of course the company was very, very wary of doing something like this at a larger scale, because even 5% you would be impacting a lot of
Yeah.
revenue.
A lot of business.
Very interestingly, the entire thing went down. So we thought at least we knew the attach rates would go down, ancillaries would go down, but we thought that the speed of booking, the conversions would go up. Very interestingly, here in this case, everything went down. So the story starts with things going
Oh,
down,
okay.
right? And it was a lot of hard sell that way to the new product head and to the CEO and everybody, and saying, and I was new into my role. I said, I've seen some of these designs and they seem like they would work, but they don't seem to work in this kind of a flow. And let us all go find out why it's not working and redo that piece all over again. And that's where all these sort of tenets, older rules and systems got broken away. We spoke to customers and we very quickly figured out, when you're buying a high ASP product, average selling price of between say 5,000 to 15,000, mid-haul prices were at that point. So $5,000, and where the mistakes are very costly. So if you book a ticket for 5,000, you have to typically charge us 3,500 unless you've taken insurance, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So for cancellations and for even changing. So for that, then for customers, the speed was a problem.
Understood.
I
Very new.
want to know what am I booking, just because it was like, almost like walking on ice. That, yeah, I'm
Yes.
going too fast. So we saw people constantly coming back from the payment page to the previous page, trying to figure out. So massive dropbacks into the previous step. And the whole thing was that sometimes we keep thinking speed is better, speed is better. At that point, I created a little framework. It's called the 3C framework, that for every customer, and that framework has to be thought through. Needs is right kind of choices, not too many, not too less. needs the right kind of control.
True.
It needs to be control of all the steps, and if he wants to move back and forth, he should only do it. And control also means a whole lot of other things. And clarity. And again, clarity can go both ways. So because we live this dual world, each of these items should be seen very contextually. So the
Understood.
big C is the context itself, but choice, clarity, control. And at every time we looked at that new, we were missing something or the other. So either at the last step, he was missing clarity on what he's buying. Choices
Understood.
like seat. Many times, if you're traveling alone, you may not mind
Mhm.
sitting anywhere. But if you're traveling with somebody else, you want to book your seats. I mean, very often.
Yeah.
If nothing else, people
Yeah.
want to
Yeah.
just see how many seats are there. Can I, like, do an auto assign, if they're enough? And if everything is sort of filled out, then we might as well book, because I'm going to get some really at the back of the plane. So there are many psychologies that go through while people are. And
That's true.
people want to have those choices, even if they're not picking it. So you window shop,
Understood.
right? Right. So
Yeah.
that was not, so there is good friction and there's bad friction, right? So where it feels like, you're stopping them from moving on, where they hate
Yeah.
your tops
Mm.
and bottom, that's a bad friction. Where the friction is telling you, please stop and look, don't make a mistake, then that's a good friction, right? So what we
Understood.
did was,
Understood.
reducing number of steps. We actually increased number of steps, and we tested at
Understood.
every step and gave the full clarity, giving the control to skip whatever they didn't want to. So give them the
Sure.
choices that they wanted, give a easy skip through. And we also gave a button so you can skip through all if you want to. And yeah, we, over a period of 3 months, we pulled all the conversions back, and actually it went up. Our attach rates improved. It went beyond, what was earlier from the hold out. And that's where I thought, every time you're doing these workflows, focus on what kind of control, what kind of choices, and what kind of clarity you want to give. And especially when it's a high ASP product, person needs to check, double check with where changing your mind is going to be very expensive. You need that. So you do some very similar things even in Zomato side. For a particular point of time, you can actually cancel your order, because we know the food has not
Yeah.
been picked up for, so you can cancel your order.
Mm.
But we still want to make
Understood.
your changing mind easier. So food rescue kind of helps you partly with that. So delight can come through many such cases where the person least expects to be helped or to be supported, and then system goes and does that. So that's a lot of delight.
Understood. Understood.
So
But I think, yeah, I think that is very, very insightful, sir. First of all, the 3C framework, right, of sort of giving people more control, clarity, and then giving them the right number of choices. I think we always talk about reducing the cognitive load on the user so that they don't have to think about a lot of factors. But as you mentioned, places where people want to be slow so that they're making the right decisions, I think that might be something that they helps build more, I think, visibility into what actually is happening, and then at least makes them feel that they are in control of the choices, right? For example, the seats that you mentioned. I think about the reports of the latest crashes, it has come out that couple of seats are maybe more safe, and people are now very inquisitive if they can get access to all of that. So I think very, very fair. However, if I were taking care of the product of, let's say, a booking platform, right, I would also want to experiment the same thing, that reduce all the friction, because that is what I felt actually creates a lot of sort of challenges for me. But yeah, I
very
think fair.
interestingly, what you mentioned, because of the crashes, and one of the things I had bit of a struggle with my PM at that point, I wanted to mention the aircraft body in
Understood.
long haul flights, right? And even in short haul flights. So the experience of actually using a turboprop and from using other kinds of planes, the experiences are different, and you must tell them which one. So many times I've seen people end up and they suddenly realize, oh, this is what I'm getting into. That spoils
Yeah.
their experience. And one of the biggest, coming to travel, the optimizations are done on what is called the SRP, the search result page. Now, in India, 7 or 8 large airlines, and with multiple timings and lots of rate cards, it's still a long SRP. Now, imagine 180 odd airlines when you're going abroad, and there are different fare
Okay.
types. So
Yeah.
it's a battleground for bringing the best that suits your. And then some people prefer going straight. Some people, especially on slightly longer hauls, love stopovers. Some people would like to stop over a particular, like I want to get into a Dubai mall, so they would want to. So there's so many choices that you have to. So again, giving that choice without increasing that cognitive load or without overwhelming, that's the role of the designer. And at the end of it, if any mistake that they may make, that's the role of the company really to support through design of the structures, through design of the customer delight teams and CRMs, etc., to help that guy, that person through the entire journey. So experiences are pre-booking, booking, post-booking, and
Actually,
post-experience also, right? So to
yeah.
similarly seems that, like I said, there are many such myths that go around. I hear a lot of people talk about intuitive. You would hear literally every product manager make it intuitive. Intuitive is only based on existing mental models. If you already know
Yeah.
something, then I can intuit that on an. But if existing model doesn't exist, then it can't be intuitive. It can be a learnable system. How quickly can I
And
make you learn? And mental models can support. They can also actually break your system. So yeah. Sorry, you were saying something.
no, no. I was just adding that I think what you mentioned about delight, right? I think helping users where they least expect also creates this trust, which keeps bringing them back on, let's say, the same product that we are sort of creating. I think creating that sort of going over and above and creating and understanding the challenges across till they have used our service and maybe they are ready for the next one. I think that is very, very powerful. So one of the things that I think another quick fire is around that. I think in designs, as you are building a, let's say, career, there are a lot of myths that we come across, right? So what is one myth that you believe you sort of strongly disagree with? Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I think any myth, for example, anything
Yeah.
that has been told to you that this is how it works, it needs to be questioned because everything has a domain of applicability, everything has a context. But what does intuition mean? And I've had a lot of problems explaining this piece itself many times to people. People associate a lot of these. So at some point, icons become symbols. When do they become symbols? When they are widely regarded and understood. Problem is, we think a lot of these icons are symbols. They're not as yet.
Understood.
So we associate a lot of meaning with them. Just because a larger platform is using it, then it must be great. That's again not true. Um, in fact, I've seen Google use has, for example, on mobile, a lot of usability issues. Just because they're using it, it doesn't make it better. You have to test it for yourself. So just being used very widely, very largely, and being called upon, this law, that law. Every law needs a lot of thinking with the domain of your application, with your context. And this is where the designer comes in. Because
Understood.
everything else, if you were just to follow laws, then AI can do it and any other guy can do it.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
here to question and bring that. I think that's the most important thing. And everything I'm going to talk about is going back and doubting whether this works or not.
Understood.
Honestly speak, in entire product domain today, product design domain, what are we doing? We are literally just reusing what is already being built. Right?
Understood.
How many times have we really created something fundamentally different? There are reasons for that. Once
Hmm.
you've learned to play with the system in a certain way, you would not want to break that. And
Understood.
this is where the curious mind of a designer comes in. What are these models which are actually inherently broken but widely used?
Understood.
So I think we can work a lot more into that. Otherwise, anything that we hear in the same words like seamless, intuitive, longer engagement, I don't think, like you said, anything that breaks my trust, anything that breaks my health,
Hmm.
mental health, physical health, anything that makes it more addictive, makes it, long term, if it really fails for me, then it's not good design. And we should question everything
Understood.
that needs. Yeah. So I think that's what it is. Myths are myths and they need to be questioned.
No, no, I think that's a very, very fair take, sir. I think just jumping on to the last sort of quick fire question, I think we discussed a lot at the starting as well that how, let's say, the Indian user is different from the global user, and there is lack of, let's say, learning material, etc. But just one quick sort of aspect about Indian user behavior that you feel that, let's say, the global teams generally miss, and that is where, let's say, having Indian specific or Indian folks designing for the Indian user becomes very, very critical, who understand their behavior.
Very interestingly, I'll say I hear very often that Indians are very, very value conscious and things like that. I'll give you a very reverse understanding of that. I've seen working in American travel platforms, any standard product they'll buy just because even if it's $1 cheaper, right? If they
Okay.
don't
Yeah.
have, so if you're taking a Indigo flight, it's the same
Yeah.
seats, same everything. If you're going to get a rupee cheaper, you will buy it because there's no differentiation. That's what brings you to any kind of a good product design, any kind of good product strategy is differentiation.
Understood.
People are not going to just give you more money just because you say so.
Fair
But
point.
behaviorally, we did build a lot of things like COD, cash on delivery. I
Yeah.
don't know
Yeah.
how big that is across the world because we inherently, and this is before UPI sort of came in. We did not really engage so much with credit cards and we distrusted these online systems. So KOD remains even today as a really big so cash remains very, very important for Indians. So probably India is the only place where you'll see a whole lot of these CODs happening. But uh,
Understood.
offline, there are many other behaviors which can impact how we build. In fact, that also is a call to probably rethinking how you want to build an apps and if you want to make things. I'll give you an example: refrigerators, right?
Yeah.
Across India, you open it with your right hand, which keeps your left hand free. Now,
Understood.
as
Fair.
Indians, we want to use our right hand to open, pick things, pick food,
Mm-hmm.
right? The
Mm-hmm.
entire Middle East to India to everywhere, we use our right hands to handle our food. So what happens is we typically pull our doors wide open and then pull things out. You would notice that in your homes. Not a great thing for the refrigerator. It has to work harder, especially in this climate. And a lot of them are probably even used to conk off earlier because of this
Yeah.
particular behavior. But nobody ever built a door which can be
Understood.
opened with the left hand. So now, of course, some fridges are coming where the freezers are like that, so you open with
Yeah.
left hand. But tons and tons of them, all the cheaper models are they're all right hand open. So we have sort of adapted to as a behavior which does not really suit, but by noticing these problems, I think we can design better and more suited for our culture, our behavior. So yeah, there are these very basic, simple ways. And if you were to watch how when we wake up, how we wake up, how we eat, how we bathe, what. So if you were to notice common, again, I'm saying if you stepped out of just the cities and that, whatever 4,000 odd towns and sort of cities, then you'll notice a lot of these things. And I don't think our products are built for them. They have to just somehow adapt to the way it's been done for somebody else who doesn't care for these particular aspects. That's what it is. There's nothing right or wrong.
No, wow, sir. I think the way of operating a fridge, I think that is just one basic aspect, but teaches you so much about how to observe user behavior and then how can you actually simplify so many things for them, which obviously can have far-reaching impact and positive impact in terms of business as well as users as well. But I think, Sir, I've learned more conversing with you for the last few hours than the entire 12, 15 years of building products and sort of delivering a sort of value. Quite a few user insights about how design is all about solving problems and it should be the conscience of the company. So, really, really thank you, sir, for the interesting nuggets across. But any finally closing thoughts for you about the design and its importance. I think those final nuggets will be very, very important and critical. But thanks a lot again as we wrap this up.
Right. So I think one is thank you so much for you and Rati to bring this about. I think it's really important to bring such platforms. I'm more inclined to really speak with very curious minds and maybe small numbers. And I think we should all do that. The best way to learn design is to, teach, to speak whatever little we know. And all of us can do it. It doesn't matter if you could be fresh into design, you could still go and just speak about the work that you've done. the domain is massive. I think those are the most important things, is really, really open yourselves out, speak more, meet more, spend some time on weekends, even though you're in difficult jobs, spend some time researching, speaking with smarter people. Also, maybe a little controversial, I think in India, again, we have this slightly hero worship kind of a culture. We tend to really idolize a certain people who do certain things in certain. So I've seen a lot more in Bangalore than maybe in Delhi, and that's all right. I mean, that's okay. But again, let that not pull you into just one thought process. Design is really, really broad, wide, and some of the best practitioners of design are not really designers themselves per se, are not really labeled as designers. They're all over. They're not known. It's your job. It's our job to go find them. And unfortunately, I think now my last words would be about this world the way it is. It's really broken. It's really warped on. And if there's one idea which is really, really out of sync with all this stuff that you talk about, technology, Gen AI, progress, one idea that's completely out of context here is war. If you still need war, then we are not progressed beyond the Neanderthals or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
the
We are
old
we're
age.
very, 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 very old. And everybody who gets into this warmongering and essentially are a human with reptilian brains who are doing all kinds of nonsense. It's a very, very outdated system. And I'm really happy to be part of a country where people don't see this as, at least most of the people don't see it as, if you've been a country which is, we cannot say as a warmongering. And it's also because the way the thought forms which have sort of shaped our ideologies. And I think it's really, really important to understand this excessive competitiveness, fighting for resources, mine, yours. Again, going back to what the astronaut says, the world looks seamless and it's just one
Yeah,
world and it's
just
nothing
one word.
really. So I think we should have a better worldview, cleaner worldview, wider worldview. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as it says, and we shouldn't restrict ourselves to very small, little micro copies and micro interactions and micro. Those are interesting, though useful, but the the depth of and the width of design is much more than what we have actually given ourselves permission to.
That is very, very helpful, sir. And I think when I take a look back, right, I think in this conversations that we have had, how we have thought that design is just not a very small part of what we are doing, but it is a maybe a larger responsibility to drive the world forward in the right direction. And there are obviously a lot of things that are broken right now. I always question that why do we even need a war to maybe prove a point, right? But I think on a larger setting, I think if we move towards becoming more intelligent species, I think design will continue to play even a larger role. And obviously, really grateful for the insights and a lot of learnings that we sort of got from you. I'll call on
Uh,
Rati now. Yeah, Rati, please feel free to sort of join and help us steer towards the end. Yeah.
Thank you so much. First of all, I'd like to thank you, Amar, that you have really steered this conversation in a very great direction. This made all the difference. And special thank you to you, sir. You have just had such a great insights. Those you have been so generous actually in terms of, giving your ideas, giving your values and everything. So many nuggets that we are taking from here. So definitely, and like especially you not just talk about the what, you have talked about helping us understand why we have made certain decisions that specially shapes how we experience products these days. So in that manner, again, thank you so much. And just on a little note, like this is what I feel that we are starting the series for, which is product and people, not just to bring out what happens when a feature, for example, is launched, what are the post-launch wins, but actually to get into the real journeys that we
mm,
have right now talked about, real journeys when it comes to as in those quiet calls, those problem solving, step into the feet of the users and understanding those empathetic, those ethical values as a responsible designers need to have. So that way, this is pretty much, and I couldn't think of a better way to kickstart this particular series. So from that angle, sir, I wanted to know how did you feel about this conversation?
mm.
How do you feel about us bringing this product and people series to life, which is an intersection of product strategy, behavioral science, human psychology, all in between, to basically have a better, broader lens to design overall. So, what is your idea like? How would you see product and people shape the become something that in this particular ecosystem?
So one, really, really thankful that because it also helps me go curate my thoughts. A lot of these things are not original, frankly. I just borrow from some of the masters in the field. So we have to be really, really thankful to all those guys who came before us and continue to do. And a lot of these unnamed, unknown folks who do brilliant stuff across the world in terms of being provocateurs, in terms of raising awareness, communication, building the right kind of products for contexts, which possibly does not have the same reward and many other things, but they carry on just doing it because they want to. I think in the same spirit, something like this kind of questions the validity of design, the need, and the purpose of design itself. I would be watching these conversations as more and more people come and speak, and would like to raise that bar as much as possible for every one of us. And of course, personally for me, because I can't just say it and not do it for. And I'm guilty of really not doing it too often. But yeah, it does give me that look back into, you know, was everything worth it and what I should be doing. But anyways, past is past. I think what's really, really important is how we deal with our future, which is whether we like it or not, it's changing and it's going to change in a very drastic way. So that's why maybe grounding ourselves to a focal point of understanding the purpose itself is really, really important. And I think these are the kinds of platforms which are brilliant, and everybody else who engages with it, who interacts with it, who comes back and has more conversations. And if there's even one person who possibly gets impacted by this, and there's a and creates more impact going forward, that would be brilliant, I think. And I would keep saying all the best, do more, do well, get some. Thank you so much, one, for having me and engaging me with these kinds of conversations. And I could also reminisce a lot of my older days. So it's brilliant, and also makes me rethink what I'm going to do ahead, and what I'm going to be engaging with beyond this. And I would want to do more of this and meet more people like yourselves. And it was a absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
I think with this, we would like to close our very first episode. And to everyone listening, if this particular episode just sparked any idea, it made you pause, reflect on what we have been doing and what we should be doing, I think we'd love to hear it from you. We'd love to hear your suggestions. And please, this will help us going. So please show support. We have incredible folks coming ahead, just like Joyce, sir, and we'll be happy to share so many highlights, so many insights, so many actionable takeaways that we'll be sharing. So definitely subscribe to our channel and subscribe to our newsletter. That will be super valuable for all of you. Thank you so much.